Good morning. Welcome to our New Year presentations with the Society of Petroleum Engineers Evangeline Section. I am Karen Lestell, the section chairperson for 2020-2021. Our regular monthly meetings will occur on the fourth Tuesday of the month through May of 2021. This upcoming Tuesday, September 22nd at noon, is our SPE Distinguished Lecturer, Ray Craddock, and the Science of Kerogen, Engineering Applications for Shale Exploration and Production. Please check your email and our website for details. Today, we are excited to start off our year with a special presentation to update all of our oil and gas community with the latest changes in COS SEMS. If anyone wishes to receive a continuing education certificate, please select the link on your meeting invitation or on our website. I would like to introduce our first Vice Chairperson of Programs, Ms. Lillian Espinoza-Gala, to introduce our speakers and give a few short announcements. Lillian.
Yes, can y'all see me?
I can hear you, Lily.
Okay, good morning. This was September 17th, 2020. On this day 10 years ago, quite a few of our members that work for the service companies were working really hard on the relief well for Macondo. And we were really excited when it intersected on September 19th. In the fall, we had to Thanksgiving to write, the chapters of the Presidential Oil Spill Commission, the Chief Counsel's report, and all this was issued on March 11th, 2011. And a week later, the Presidential Oil Spill Commission announced that Charlie Williams would direct the new Center for Offshore Safety. And it's been a long journey. A lot of us had, even Charlie had visions for what it would be, but it wasn't entirely up to Charlie. It was up to the member organizations and even the people in Congress. So this last decade has been a long journey. I've been to quite a few of the COS events, including the first annual event in 2013. But today, when we learned in August that there's been dramatic changes for the smaller companies and contractors, we're just really excited to be able to introduce what these changes are. So we have with us Curt Johnson, who just a few months ago left the Coast Guard in New Orleans, where he was inspecting on the Gulf of Mexico modules, the jackups, the floaters. And we have Russell Holmes, who is the new director of COS, who has a lot of degrees. Anyway, I'm not going to take up too much of your time, but one thing I would like to say, if you have questions, please type them into the chat box. And, like turn off your video, that will reduce the bandwidth. Also mute if you're not speaking. Anyway, now I hand it over to Mr. Russell Holmes and Curt.
Great, thank you very much, Lillian. I appreciate it. Just coming over, like you said, Charlie Williams would help lead the Center for Offshore Safety, and then I recently retired from the Coast Guard, where I oversaw inspections and investigations from a Coast Guard regulatory perspective offshore. And so I'm excited to be able to take over for Charlie and continue to advance offshore safety. As you mentioned, I'll be covering a little bit about what COS is, why we exist, some of our role related to SEMS, and then Curt will be talking a lot more about the COS SEMS certificates and what we've got going on related to it. But as you talked about with unfortunately the tragedy from Macondo from 10 years ago, COS was established a year after that, and to this day demonstrates the industry's commitment to advancing a culture of safety in offshore operations through transparency and knowledge sharing. The COS is designed to promote the highest level of safety for offshore drilling, completions, and operations through leadership and effective management systems, addressing communication, teamwork, and independent third-party auditing and certification. And COS enables operational excellence in part by enhancing and continuously improving industry safety and environmental performance while stimulating cooperation within the industry to share lessons and good practices. You know, as you're seeing here, our collective efforts to improve safety for the offshore oil and natural gas industry can be broken down into 4 main pillars: the SEMS audits and certificates, data collection, analysis and reporting, good practice development, and sharing industry knowledge. And we'll cover a little bit more in these throughout the next couple of slides. And then another aspect related to these, the COS also serves as the accreditation body by the Bureau of Safety Environmental Enforcement, certifying third-party auditors. One of our main efforts within the DCAR pillar is our collective effort to establish and publish the COS Annual Performance Report, which provides information shared by members for the following COS programs that you can see here: safety performance indicators and learning from incidents. So I won't read all the different bullet points that you're seeing in front of you on this slide, but I did want to highlight a little bit about some of these different aspects. And so these get shared by each of our members throughout the year. And then we have a group of folks under the DCAR committee that reviews these different performance indicators to develop an annual report. And this information that's shared by the different members denotes, for the SPI, denotes the number of types of incidents have occurred during the calendar year. And then this is an example that you'll see. We publish an annual performance report, and then this is one of the tables that you can see that breaks down into some of the different details, some of the information that we have, and then we do a 5-year average that you can kind of see over the last 5 years. Although we have been collecting data since 2013, and we keep that data so that we can get a trend and see how we are improving, or if there's areas that we need to focus more attention on over time. This information helps us guide what we really ought to be working on to help support the offshore industry. And the other aspect I talked about briefly was learnings from incidents and high value events. One of the aspects related to both of these components is really, we looked a lot at major hazard bow ties and how we could look at those from both a process safety perspective and from a personnel safety, so that we could drive improvements and to be able to identify weaknesses and barriers that we might be able to do to prevent the occurrence or recurrence of different incidents. And so one of those other aspects and projects related to that is this learning from incidents and high value learning events program. And so we take a lot of the different data that our members are providing to us, and we develop other information that you can talk about related to these things offshore. And so this program contributes to our annual performance report, but the reality is our performance report is 60 pages long on average, with a lot of wealth of detail and information, along with some appendices that provide more detail. And so the reality is, if you're offshore, you're not going to read that entire report. It's really probably designed more for the office folks and the onshore folks, but we want to be able to get that information out to the offshore workers. And so how do we do that? We take information from those learnings and we develop it into a safety share. And then these safety shares are written essentially exactly how the companies submit the information to us, but it's in an easily readable, digestible format, so that people offshore, ideally it would be posted up on a bulletin board, or different folks can get around a round table and have a discussion about it. And so it's really designed to be able to get folks to have a conversation offshore. And as you can see in this slide here, we really talk about what went wrong, why did it happen, what were the areas that were identified for improvement, and then most importantly, with each of these shares, we ask, what will we do to prevent this from happening here? So it's really designed to learn from others that are experiencing different things offshore, or near misses in some cases, and to be able to have those conversations across your facility or across your vessel offshore, so that you can learn from what's going on with others. And that's really what Center for Offshore Safety is all about, is how do we collaborate and share information so that we as an industry collectively can do better than we did in the past, and to truly learn from the different aspects that are going on offshore. So one of the other things that we develop are good practices and different guidelines to be able to help people get better with their offshore safety and safety culture. And really, safety culture is really an outreach of operational excellence. If you're doing things well, safety culture is one component of it. And so Curt will talk about that in a little bit more detail, but I wanted to just highlight on this next slide some of the different guidance documents that the Center for Offshore Safety and our member companies have collaborated and developed over the years to help support safety and environmental management systems. And so I'm not going to go through all of these, but I like putting this chart up, or this table, to kind of show here are all the different documents and reference documents that you can go to for free on our website that can help support different companies for various aspects of their management systems. And so I talked a little bit already about annual performance report and SPIs and LFIs, but I wanted to highlight a little bit more of some of the different aspects that we do to really do sharing of industry knowledge. And so if you go to the next slide, this year, next week, I wanted to highlight that we're doing an annual performance report webinar. Normally, we would roll this out during our annual safety forum, but due to COVID and different aspects that have impacted, we have delayed when we're going to be holding that until November. And so we didn't want to wait to get the data and the information out. And so next week, we're going to be doing a webinar, and we're going to be talking about the data that's in our annual performance report, what our observations are about it, and what we have already started doing, and what we intend to do in the future to help support and provide different tools and guidance documents in offshore industry.
And I'm hearing a little background noise in someone. If everyone else can mute their microphones, please.
And so I wanted to highlight too a little bit with our annual forum. This year it will not be in person. It will be a 100% virtual event. And so we're going to set it up where it's going to be 2 mornings in a row that we're going to have different panels and different guest speakers. And then the third day, we're going to have different breakout sessions in the morning and in the afternoon where we're going to do virtual roundtables where we'll have some different presentations from different subject matter experts. And then we'll be able to have a conversation through a virtual platform, much like we're doing today. And so I hope many of y'all will be able to attend that event. And then one other notice, we're doing a guidance for developing and managing procedures. It's one of the documents that we've recently finalized and published on our website. We're going to be doing a webinar at the end of this month as well to talk about what's in that document too. And so with that concludes my part, and I'm going to pass it over to Curt to get into a few more details.
Great, thanks very much. With the group we have on the line, I'm really willing to bet I don't have to spend much time on explaining the management systems aspect here. But for those that need a little prompting and remembering, remember that SEMS, it's the management system known as SEMS. It's all based on API's RP75 document. The basic elements within SEMS are shown for you there. And as you know, the agency adopted both the RP75 3rd edition and added a few points into their program within that subpart S of 30 CFR 250. So and those in the know also know, of course, that a 4th edition of API RP75 has been published, but just remember that it's a 3rd edition that was incorporated by reference by the agency. So it's a 3rd edition is the basis for operator requirements and audits within the Gulf of Mexico. Now, there's a lot of different ways that SEMS and human behavior, safety culture all interact. It's a little bit, and folks wonder, you know, kind of which drives the other. And I'd present it's a little bit like that question of which was first, the chicken or the egg. you really need all four of these aspects here. And if you look at SEMS with its technical standards, the policies, the work practices, and procedures that are set up there, you need to know what you're going to do. The individuals, the people, they need that competence that they gain through skills and knowledge of of programs. You need the general operating process, the leadership in decision making, that are all components, individual components or elements within the SEMS management system. So, and it is that leadership component of that sets behaviors in motion. And the four of these things that work together are the things that are really going to deliver those safe and reliable operations and your operational integrity. So remember, SEMS is not a compliance exercise. It's a management system, and as management systems, they're meant to be flexible and adaptive. As conditions change, as capabilities and requirements change, the system for management leads you through these steps of identifying and managing risks, enabling your continual improvement for those safe and reliable operations and an integrity of your operations. Again, it's not meant to be prescriptive. You don't check the box and say, hey, I've got this program, that program. It's the way issues interact. It's the way people make decisions and adapt to conditions and changes. That's what leads you through the continual improvement process. So from a requirements basis, again, the SEMS regulation from the agency requires all offshore operators to implement their SEMS. They have to have that program in place. Contractors, anyone operating within the Gulf, they're then obliged to integrate their SEMS with the operator. So that's the essential of why it's important to you. Everyone involved in offshore oil and gas is subject to SEMS. So everything so far is setting the stage for what you really asked us to discuss today. So I'm going to go through next just a little more detail, the aspect of the audits themselves for SEMS, the audit service providers, and then what you do about it with respect to the corrective action plans, and ultimately, why in the world would you want to pursue a SEMS certificate, and why is it important for you? So again, as an operator, under the regulation, you're required to have an audit of your SEMS at least every 3 years. The agency has some other prerogatives. They can require something in addition along the way, but the basic requirement is an audit once every 3 years. All those audits of operators must be conducted by an accredited audit service provider. And under the regulations, the audit must be based on the COS requirements documents. So we've got a handful of the 4 requirements documents that were established by COS concerning SEMS auditing were all put in place in the early days of COS. There was a belief that that in supporting SEMS, the way to assure and really develop confidence that the industry can do what it needs to do is through a program of independent auditing of SEMS programs. So there were qualifications on team members and auditors for how to, who you need to be able to conduct a SEMS audit. There are certain training requirements that are put in play, and then the actual requirements for SEMS auditing and how they get accredited were programs set up by COS and later adopted or incorporated by reference into the regulations. These documents as well, every document we've talking about through the day today is available at no cost from our website. So the audit service providers that are in place, COS began review and qualification evaluating qualifications of organizations that wanted to conduct audits in the very beginning of COS. The first audit service providers, or ASP, they were accredited in 2013. In 2015 is when the agency adopted this aspect of requiring the auditors of SEMS to be accredited and established COS as an accreditation body recognized to be able to say these are the groups that are allowed to conduct SEMS audits for the regulatory requirements. And at this point, COS remains the only accreditation body able to identify audit service providers. We do that through a memorandum of understanding with the agency, and there's significant oversight provided by the agency to make sure we're running the accreditation program properly and in accordance with procedures. There's regular reporting required on our part, and independent audits that we're expected to arrange of our program, and the agency conducts audits of our program as well. The most recent one started in November, December of last year, and was only finished a month or so ago. We're very happy to report, of course, that in that time, some 450 areas they were evaluated, and there were no known conformities identified with respect to the program. We're very happy, though, that they identified some areas that we could improve upon, and we're going through that process just like anybody else with a management system. You want to identify those areas you can continually improve. One other point I'd like to make about the agency's involvement and our involvement as we review the audit service providers. When we're reviewing audit service providers, we're collecting information about them. We do that through some observations at times when they're conducting their audits, but we're not collecting information about the operator or the contractor when they conduct those audits. It's strictly information about the ASP. So how do we go about that process? I won't spend a lot of time on this. This document as well is available on our website to review, but there are essentially 4 steps, and it's not a simple process. Most ASP have taken a year or longer to be able to demonstrate that they're qualified to be able to conduct the SEMS auditing according to the procedures that have been set in place. They set up an application which defines their management system for conducting the SEMS audits. We conduct an office assessment of them to make sure they're following their own procedures. And it's only at that point that they're allowed to even seek an operator to conduct an audit, conduct a SEMS audit. When we grant them provisional accreditation, we go out and witness them conduct that SEMS audit. And after all of that activity, any nonconformities of their performance that have been corrected, then that decision is made by a 3-person independent committee to grant that organization accreditation for a 3-year period. And then over the next 2 years, we go through a review of their operation and surveil them and through surveillance reviews and make sure they're sticking to their procedures. And after all that, the 3 years are up, they need to go through the whole process again and get reaccredited. So why would you even want a SEMS audit? If you've got this activity, you've got your program in place, you believe everything is going well, well, if you're an operator, you're regulated, your regulation requires this. So there may be times when you want internal audits. You may want an external party to help with that. But to meet your regulatory requirements from the agency, you're going to have to have an audit conducted. But why would a contractor choose to have their program audited? And it's a forward-thinking step. It's an independent check for you of whether or not there may be any gaps in your SEMS, because you really want to figure out if you've got an issue before your client does. If you're You want to be able to fix it under your schedule and your timeline. But if you've got a gap, you want to get it figured out, and an independent audit can help you with that. It may even be a condition for being selected. It's certainly a process step in the continual improvement process. So the audits help promote that. And lastly, if you are actually on site when the operator is having their SEMS audited, you're going to be examined as well. And you certainly don't want to be in a situation where the operator has a non-conformance identified because of your performance. So as a contractor, you want to be prepared as well. You want to know as much about your system as you can so you can improve, so you can assure that you're providing the best service possible to your clients. All right, so you've had an audit. So if we were all in person, this is where, I'd be doing the Socratic method and starting to ask some questions out there, but this venue really doesn't matter for that. And I'd be asking the question, what's the worst thing that can happen from an audit? And after one or two people say, well, gee, you find something really terrible, it's going to cost you a lot or be a problem. And I contend that's the good news if you find out there's an issue. The worst thing that can happen is you don't deal with it. If you become aware of something that something is wrong and you don't deal with it, you don't fix it, you don't learn from it, you're going to be in a world of hurt, because trust me, it's going to come out at some point, and hopefully it's through some exposure of the process as opposed to an incident or a death. These are the sorts of things that no one wants to reach at that point. So if you've had an audit, you need to learn from it. You need to fix those issues, and you want to, the problems themselves, and then you want to prevent its recurrence through promotion of a real and effective corrective action plan. So what's shown here is a recent guidance that was prepared and published by COS, and we're going to discuss this just a little further. It's important to distinguish, though, that the audit service provider, they help you identify the issue. They're going to say, hey, look here, this is something that needs improvement or needs changing or is plain broken that needs to be dealt with. The corrective action plan is owned by the auditee. So once you've got something identified, your organization is the one that needs to decide what to do, how to do it, and you need to go through a process, just like any other management system, to deal with that. So here's a graphic out of the new guidance document for corrective action plans. And it shows the steps and the flow with respect to all the points to have an effective corrective action plan. We're not going to go through everything here, but you figure something out. You're going to deal with some corrections. You have to look for underlying causes. Then you develop your overall plan. You implement those. You monitor your progress along the way, and ultimately you want to evaluate whether or not your corrective action actually worked. So, and I direct you to our guidance document for a lot more information on this. A couple of points to make here. When we talk corrections are meant to deal with the immediate problem. This, close the valve. It's leaking, whatever is out there is just going overboard. Close the valve. So you close the valve. And that issue is not necessarily limited to the site where the problem was found. So corrections can extend beyond the immediate locale that it was identified, and you need to check for that. Now, corrective action is about prevention. That's, and it may require implementing your management of change procedures. It most of the time requires time. because you need to figure out those underlying causes. It's not just a knee-jerk close the valve. You need to go out there and figure out why the valve wasn't closed or why the situation was in play. You know, go through your underlying process for determining cause. Once you identify that, you can start establishing your plan of action. You potentially need a budget for that. You may even need permission for that from the agency to implement the changes and to schedule it. So all of that's going to require time to figure out what you're going to do and then to actually implement it. In the end, you, as I mentioned, you want to evaluate if the changes were effective at preventing recurrence. So let's look at what you actually want to put into the plan, into your corrective action plan, because every corrective action really needs, requires, in our viewpoint, that you have a designated person, one specific person responsible for implementing that plan. You need regular reporting about that action until it's completed. You need it to be checked for effectiveness, as we pointed out, and as you write your plan, you want to say, all right, I can finish this. We need to be able to finish this by January 1st or the particular due date. You want to record in your plan and at some point that when you finished it, and then at some point the actual date that you said, yes, this actually worked. This did what we intended it to do. So that's for every corrective action. The plan itself, you really need one person with responsibility for overall development and monitoring of the plan. So someone who's collecting the information, overseeing the individuals who take care of each specific corrective action out there. Now, it may, depending on your organization, this may be the same person or not, but you need to have someone involved with a plan who approves it, who says, yeah, this all makes sense. Not only that, I know what's going on here, and I'm the one with authority to assign necessary resources. So the approver of the plan has to be someone that both understands what's needed and has that authority to assign resources so you can get it done. So let's take a look at an example or two. And these are examples, these examples and more are in the guidance document we provided. So if we look at, let's see if I can get fancy here with the laser pointer in this program. The original finding in this case, in this example, says this hazard analysis had not been completed for this particular asset. The correction, remember the thing you can do right away is you've got your facilitator for hazard analysis and your team identified. And they've actually scheduled that they're going to conduct their hazard analysis for this asset. You know, it's not immediate that you can finish it, but they scheduled it. You figured out who's responsible. So for this finding that you had this, this hazard analysis was not completed, you know, how did that happen, right? How could you have a facility that didn't have this? So when you looked into it, you figured out this asset was added through an acquisition, and the prior owner considered it to be just like or sufficiently like other properties they owned. So whether or not that was the right thing here, the point was that's how you got it with you. And as it came into your operations, there was still no hazard analysis. So corrective action to deal with the fact that this asset came in without it was you're going to review all of those acquired assets and figure out whether or not a hazard analysis exists. There may be more of them. So, and you want to include them, of course, as you, you know, either get it conducted or when that update schedule rolls into play. So all of them need to identify. It's assigned to the acquisition team lead to figure that out. They're the ones that should have had this in the program to begin with. So finding, correction, cause, corrective action, and it was assigned to someone, but there's actually Okay? There's a second corrective action. You've actually got to finish that hazard analysis for all the identified assets, and then you'll proceed with that. That's a different person from the acquisition team lead who figured out what was missing. So now each of these actions, these corrective action, then has to have, as we pointed before, a target date, your actual completion date, and then the date you checked it for effectiveness. So in this example, multiple actions for the same finding and cause, but that's not always the case. It doesn't necessarily cover everything. There can be different causes, the same issue, the same finding out there, the same correction in place, but you know, how can we keep this acquisition team from making the same mistake? So they hadn't considered this need for hazard analysis during due diligence. So you're going to review as a corrective action and update your acquisition procedures to assure that they're checking for the hazard analysis is required. And that's a different, that may be an entirely different person as well. So, and again, more examples are in the guidance document we have. I really encourage you to get into that in detail. So congratulations, you've made it. You know, you actually, you went through this process. There was a whole lot of time and effort, and yes, it's going to cost you money to have a third party conduct your audit out there. So you put a lot of time and effort into this. You put a lot of time and money as well to finish your corrective action plan. You've implemented this plan. You've met if you're an operator, you met your regulatory requirement. If you're a contractor, maybe you met your client's expectations for getting this done, your own expectations. But most importantly, you've improved your SEMS. You identified the issues, you've figured out what needed to be done, and you made improvements. You're better positioned to prevent incidents. This is a great position to be in for you, and you surely should be congratulated about that. But who else knows? And who might want to know? And who might this be important to? So let's talk about the certificates and what it means, why we think they're important. And first off, of course, how you go about getting one. The important news that really prompted this discussion or this presentation earlier is that COS said, you know, this is not just something that members ought to be entitled to. Certificates are a reflection of good operations and important steps that should be available to COS members and really any oil and gas operator and contractor working out there. So with the changes made this spring, the certificates are now available to members and non-members. They've always been available to, as a contractor or driller and operators. And on our website is a list of those companies that have achieved and been granted certificates to date. Every COS member that along the way has or is achieving a certificate. We've had several drillers and service companies that have achieved certificates as well and listed on our site. The other big change though is that anybody in the world at this point can achieve and be granted a COS SEMS certificate. Whether you're in the Gulf of Mexico or outside the Gulf of Mexico, it's just everyone has to go through the same procedures for this. So what are those? First off, the basic aspect, you need to use a COS accredited audit service provider, and they're going to conduct an audit relative to the auditing requirements of COS under COS 203. So they conduct that audit. The other thing that audit service provider needs to do is they're going to verify completion of certain corrective actions if you had any nonconformities from your audit. The distinction here, this finding level 1, this is a term and classification of finding that was set up in the new program, COS program this year. Think of findings level 1 as major discrepancies, major nonconformities. And you can go to our documents for a specific explanation of that term. So again, to get a certificate, you have to use an COS accredited ASP. They're going to use COS procedures to conduct that. And then that ASP is going to verify that you've completed the corrective action of those major nonconformities. So think of the SEMS certificate as evidence that your SEMS was audited. It was an independent, credible, third-party audit service provider, and they used agency-specified procedures, industry-supported procedures developed by subject matter experts. So there's rigor in the program that said your program was audited. But the big difference, and difference to many of the other, say, certificate programs and ISO programs, I believe, is that your certificate only gets issued after the audit's been conducted and you've implemented corrective action for those high-level concerns out there. It was verified that you completed those corrective action by that same independent third party. One note to point out here, and there's confusion from time to time. The audit service provider confirms that your actions were completed. You did what you said you were going to do in your corrective action plan. Within the auditing process, the effectiveness may not be identifiable right away. Whether or not your prevention worked, you may not be able to tell until the same set of circumstances arises. So it may take some time to actually verify effectiveness of preventive action. Oftentimes, this is done in a subsequent audit. For operators, that's happening every 3 years, and that could be evaluated in that time. You internally may be verifying and checking that at that time. But to achieve a certificate, you complete the audit, you complete your corrective action, the audit service provider confirms that those actions were completed. It's not till a later time that effectiveness may be able to be verified. So what is this good? Why is this good for you other than this evidence? Well, if you hold a certificate, maybe as a contractor, you're going to need less scrutiny when someone evaluates you. A prime contractor or an operator is evaluating you to be able to work for them. We know of situations where operators have used a certificate. They've used this process to support rationale or support why they ought to be allowed to operate in a particular country. We know that's happened in the Mediterranean. We know it's happened off the coast of Africa, where the operator has gone through a SEMS audit of their operations in those locations. In that location, they've completed corrective actions, and they presented that information with as part of a certificate program to the agency in those companies, and it's as an evidence of them being a good corporate citizen for their ability to be there. Now, likewise, we know operators are considering contractors with a certificate to have an edge up. They know that there's evidence here that they may be less work, let's say, to deal with in their process. They're going to support their program more easily or better because they know there's an effective SEMS program in place with that for that particular contractor. And again, we know of operators that have gone to particular contractors, chosen them because they were of certificates. In the end, it's distinguishing you, the holder of the certificate, is different from others. You're a responsible corporate citizen, and that can be valuable. Now, who might see value in that? Well, the agency, a government agency can see value in that. You're a client, as a client or prime contractor may see value in that. Prospective employees. There's lots of discussion nowadays about particularly with what they call it, the great shift change, as more mature individuals are leaving the workplace and younger workforces coming in. They want to work for someone that they can believe in, that they can support, that they don't have to defend to their friends as a problem somewhere. So here's a group of people that you may want to be able to support and draw into your organization and say, look, we do have an effective program for controlling risk and in limiting incidents out there, and here's why you can trust us. Times are tough out there with respect to money. Lenders, someone providing money for your organization to keep things moving out there. Lenders may seek this or see this as a value added to say why you should be allowed to receive this money or be part of their portfolio. Insurance providers, you see it any number of times in the landside activities. Of course, many of the offshore providers are self-insured, the larger the organization, but not everybody is that way. If you're going to a third party for insurance coverage, again, this can be a differentiator that says, listen, I can be considered better than others out there. So why, here's why we should be discounted against your normal rates. A potential partner, right? A potential purchaser. There's any number of folks out there that may look at you and say, they've got a certificate and we can believe in them more. They're going to be less work for us to maintain, to put in play, to incorporate within our organization. Or gosh, those are some great things they've got out there, and maybe we need to put that and use their expertise within our organization out there. So there's a whole, as I say, a whole universe of people out there that could see these certificates as a differentiator, and it's why we're so excited about this program and hope you are as well. So that really wraps up the specifics of what we wanted to cover here today. We'd kind of open the door for some questions and more so here and commentary and what I may do is go ahead and close this particular screen, because as a presenter, I can't see the chat boxes and things where the questions and things may be coming into play. And we'll let the organizers here determine whether or not to ask them in person and more. So thank you very much. Please get in touch. I'm happy to discuss things, of course, we have a Q&A now, but if you reach us at the Center for Offshore Safety, go to our website and look for more as well. So thank you, and let's turn to some questions. I'm not seeing.
Curt, I'll help facilitate some of the questions, but there are a few different questions that came in, but specifically some of the ones for you is there a possible liability if an ASP verifies that a corrective action plan item was completed? And then follow on with that is, what if the contractor action was later not successful in preventing an accident, or the contractor does not maintain their SEMS?
Those are both very good questions. And to the first point of is there liability, um, from one standpoint, there's always liability. There's always going to be some or liability within an organization. But I would ask you as well, what is a bigger issue? Is a bigger issue not knowing the issue is there, or is a bigger issue addressing it and dealing with it? Now, ASPs and the auditee, the operator, the contractor, yeah, you want to be right. You want you want to have a you want enough information to be able to confirm that yes, the action was taken. And that's a distinction again between the to achieve a certificate and demonstrated effectiveness or continuity of maintaining your program. The certificate says the audit was conducted under rigorous, controlled, accepted procedures, and corrective action was completed. So anyone could be charged with saying they didn't effectively prevent something if something did occur later. But the key here is you're in a better position for addressing it, for dealing with it, and that's the thing you want to focus on. Have I reasonably addressed that concern? I guess the follow-on here is that the operator or contractor, yes, they're expected to maintain their SEMS. They're expected to continue their operation in conformance with requirements. So the program, let's say, might the program needs to be maintained.
Curt, another question that we have is there any reciprocity between the offshore safety case and SEMS certificate?
I may have to punt on that one, as in the offshore safety case is, in my understanding of that out of the North Sea, is a bit limited. But the certificate, if in this case, I imagine could be issued for an offshore safety program or an organization with an offshore safety case set into play. But again, the issue for the certificate is that we're issuing certificates with respect to the SEMS within API RP75. So as long as that offshore safety case maintains or includes the components of RP75, a certificate could be issued if an audit's conducted by an accredited ASP to review the conditions of API RP75, and there's a verification of corrective action. So, and as I say, the specifics of safety case and in those, I'd leave to someone else to describe further.
The other question that we received in the chat was if COS had a plan for getting this information out to different folks. And I responded in the chat that we are working with our marketing and communications team to be able to push more information about COS and our relevance and how we are helping and providing support to the offshore industry. And so this will be one of the other areas over the next couple of months that we are working to develop some different materials to be able to get the word out to folks. Because if they don't know these tools exist, then what's the point of creating them for folks? And so it really is, we need to show people that, hey, we exist. There's reasons that we've developed these different documents because we've learned over time the different areas that we need to make things better. And so we've developed all this information. And so you're right, in the chart, we need to be able to get that word out to different folks. So we're looking at different ways that we can do that. We leveraged LinkedIn and social media for this event today and to try to get the word out for different folks. And then we're also working within the American Petroleum Institute API within their global industry services segment. And so then they periodically push things out through LinkedIn, and they're looking at some other sources within different oil and gas magazines that we may be able to market and promote some of the COS aspects of some of the guidance that we're developing.
In addition, COS hosted a webinar on April 21st where we discussed all of these documents and the certificate document in particular. And that webinar is available on the COS website for people who want to go back and see that whole webinar.
Yeah, that's a great point, Brandy. I appreciate you bringing that up.
So this session itself was we were really pleased that it came up when it did. We were asked about this because it's we're figuring out and putting in play the steps to get the word out, and this was an excellent launch step by itself. We appreciate that, and it's time to gain momentum and keep getting the word out further.
So a couple more, Curt, I don't know if you can see the comments in the chat function.
I can finally, yes.
But you got a couple more down there. One of them is, will Bessie eventually require contractors to have a COS certificate rather than keeping it as an option?
Oh gosh, my crystal ball is a little hazy on that here. I do know that the agency was very excited with the guidance documents for the corrective action plan and the audit plan and audit report. So there is inertia, the rigor within the government programs on what they can adopt is takes time. So stay tuned and not only see what happens, but add your voice to however you want to see this happen out there. But the documents that we prepared to date, the agency was very excited about, and we know they're starting to encourage their use with future audits.
So another one up there, Curt, is there any crossover or work with the offshore wind industry? And is there any talk of bringing these requirements to the land oil and gas industry?
Very, very interesting questions there, and let's take it in two parts. Everything that the Center for Offshore Safety has been working on is offshore. We believe the processes and the procedures are applicable practically anywhere. But I just point out that API has some equivalent programs under development, and whether it's pipeline safety or upstream safety programs that are under development and working through their steps. The particular subject matter experts working in those areas. The process safety site assessment program within API is the other program for downstream that is very exciting and been very well received. For offshore wind, that's a very exciting area from the standpoint of COS, because our understanding with the agency is that they have been looking to and referring to the SEMS program itself, the API RP75 program, and the COS procedures as ways these organizations can or should manage themselves. Now, how the specifics of those regulations get put into play, again, we need the crystal ball. But my understanding is they're certainly being encouraged as effective management systems to control your safety and environmental management.
So Curt, this is Charlie. Could I just add something real quick?
Please do.
So I just wanted to say that that the same. So it's been made clear that Bessie is going to be the regulator for SEMS in the offshore wind business, and it's going to be the same group in Bessie that does SEMS, for offshore exploration and production now. So and the regulation, the current regulation was really done by BOEM, and it also refers that you have to have an effective SEMS system. And but now that it's been made clear that Bessie is going to be the group that does the regulating, and so I think that my guess is that they'll expand the definition of SEMS beyond what it says in the BOEM regulation. But the BOEM regulation clearly says you do have to have a SEMS if you're in the offshore wind energy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I see a question, Phil Emanuel, with respect to the SEMS certificates. And the question was whether or not the certificate has an expiration date. And in short, the answer is yes, that because the current program involving SEMS and SEMS auditing requirements does not have ongoing surveillance of of a particular management system to make sure things are still in conformance and still effective. First off, for operators under the SEMS regulation, they're expected to have another audit every 3 years. So the idea was to time the certificate to that 3-year term because, well, conditions change, requirements change, learnings are in play out there, and or a shift or in potential management and how things are done. So yes, when a certificate is issued, it's set up to expire within 3 years of the actual audit. And we hope everyone would want another one. Essentially, is the having once they conduct another audit and go through their steps. I saw a comment here about if they're contractors or operators, folks on the line, what their thoughts or opinions might be. Is that something that we could open up or encourage any comments on?
This is Edwin Leckren. I was typing a very long-winded comment or response to that comment, but I represent a service company or contractor. And my thoughts are, I think this is a good opportunity for those that want to be proactive and look for other opportunities for continuous improvement to get out ahead of their competitors and to showcase their safety programs. I believe that in the future, I can foresee the operators making this requirements as part of their contractor selection process. How near the future that's going to be, I don't know. I believe, like with most things, the majors tend to adopt things sooner than the smaller companies. My biggest concern is that cost of the audit is going to be prohibitive, especially with the state of the industry as it is right now. being that it's not mandatory from an operator standpoint or regulatory, unless somebody's top management is just fully behind it, they're not going to want to spend the money on it. Kind of like with a quality management system, while all companies would benefit from having them, they typically don't go that route until somebody else makes them.
Those are all good points. And the counter, of course, is, let's say when economic conditions turn around, how long do you wait? Or what position would you be in if you make the effort now to achieve the certificate? And as everything is picking up, wouldn't you want to be first in line?
I agree.
Well, thank you. Those are the important observations. Lillian, David, Karen, are there other thoughts we'd like to bring forward? You know, from Russ and my standpoint, we certainly want to thank you, but want to, and in the end, want to make sure there's a, you consider participating in our COS's webinar next week about with the release of our annual report. We'd encourage you as well to participate and tune in for the release of our procedures guidance document. The procedures as an issue, as an underlying cause, something related to procedures, has consistently shown up as high frequency of with respect to incidents and issues offshore, and so a significant amount of time has been spent in developing this guidance for writing procedures, developing procedures, making sure they're understandable, acceptable, effectively rolled out, and then maintained. So a very important set of guidance, we think, for the offshore community. And I forget the date right now that's being offered, but that is coming up soon. And then, of course, our forum within upcoming. All very important projects, and we hope you regularly tune into our website and all those offerings.
Curt, I just want to ask one question. Is the big change in August, prior to this, you had, if you were an operator, you had to pay $250,000 a year to be a member of COS, and a drilling contractor $175,000, and a service company $75,000. So is the big change is that you do not have to pay those huge fees to be a member of COS, but you could, if you get your SEMS audit, you can get the certificate?
Well, the certificates are independent of being a member of COS anymore. So and I'll punt on the concept of fees, other than to point out, I think annually the organization is reviewing its fee structure to try to encourage more members.
Lillian, I'll jump in for a minute, and you are right that in the past, member dues had been viewed as a cost, a barrier to entry for participation for different folks. And so we have looked at that over the years. Last year, we did what's called a 60-40 split, where API actually covered 40% of the dues structure for members to be able to participate to lower those costs. A few years earlier, we had lowered some of the costs before that, and we're having those discussions, as Curt mentioned, about potentially lowering, reducing, minimizing some of the member dues going forward, so that we can get more of the offshore industry to participate with the Center for Offshore Safety. Right now, approximately 62% of all offshore work hours fall under members of the Center for Offshore Safety. And so that's a combination of operators and contractors, but we are looking to try to expand that going forward. And so we are having some discussions about how can we do that from a member dues perspective, and then also from a marketing communications perspective as well. But it doesn't prohibit folks from being on some of the work groups, even if they aren't a COS member. For example, we've got one of our groups, we know we have some lifting incidents that happen offshore. And so we specifically have a safe lifting conference every 2 years to address and talk about some of the things that we're seeing offshore for lifting and how we can do things better and be able to capture more data. And so some of the people on our work group for that are not COS members, but they're subject matter experts that deal with cranes on a regular daily basis for how they do maintenance of them, how you operate them. And we're incorporating their knowledge and expertise to develop different guidance documents or recommendations for how you can better collect data that can provide you more insight into what's happening offshore, and then how we can provide good practice documents or other tools that people can use to help try to minimize incidents and improve safety offshore.
Well, in 2016, 2017, for a company to have somebody on a working group, they had to pay for them to be in the meetings 8 hours a day, once a month. Is that still the case?
So we have, so it's not necessarily for some of the work groups, you do not have to pay a membership dues fee to be on some of the work groups.
No, that's what I mean. They had to have whoever was going to be on the work group give up 8 hours a month to be on that work group.
Oh, you're talking from a personnel time commitment.
Right.
And so each of the work groups are slightly different for what their time commitments are. It depends what projects that they're working on at the time. Some work groups meet every 2 weeks. Other groups meet once a month. And then you break apart and you do some work either on your own or maybe in smaller collaboration efforts.
But there's no requirement, really. There's no, it's not a condition of entry or participation that you say, I'm going to give 8 hours a month or 16 hours a month. There's we certainly want as much participation as we can get, but there are a number of work groups where the folks are tuning in to offer in thoughts, and they want to know what's happening, but there's not a significant amount of effort going on outside of listening in. But again, the more you give, the more you get, right? For participation. If you want your thoughts to be considered, you've got to participate and speak up and defend them.
And Curt, this chart, I just wanted to add, to reemphasize, what you said, that the certificate program, it isn't conditioned on membership. But the other thing I wanted to mention is all operators are required to do their SEMS audits using accredited audit service provider. So accrediting the ASPs and the ASPs conducting the SEMS audits for all operators, that whole thing is independent of COS membership. And so, all of these non-member operators have been having to use accredited ASPs to do their SEMS audits for BSEE. That's not tied together. And like you said several times, all of these documents are free on the website, whether you're a member or not.
That's right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, are there any more questions?
Yeah, I'd like for you to tell us about how consultants, training providers, academics that may not ever need a SEMS, but that may want to have more of this knowledge that y'all are collecting, how you think we fit in best with the COS organization.
Well, excellent question. It sounds like someone who would love to help us help out with a work group uh, and offer some expertise. I think contact one of us for specific areas or questions, but start off, of course, by just exploring our website. Looking at the available information in documents, and I believe we have some information about committee structure and work group structure and what we're working on, where it should be evident in the announcements. And if you've got an interest, whether it's a subject matter expert on lifting, on well integrity, maintenance questions, these are areas that can always benefit from input and expertise. So participating in the work groups is I'll call it essentially open. They're expected to be led by COS members, and the project itself needs endorsement by COS to say, yeah, this is one we're going to try to tackle, and we can actually dedicate the resources to do it. So contact us, check out the website, and see where you can fit in.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd really like to thank Angela and the SPE Gulf section for posting our thing on your section, and also for joining our call today. And I just thank you, Curt and Russ, for doing this and letting us in on this information early at the beginning of the year.
Absolutely. We're happy to be here and happy to talk about it. You know, definitely passionate. I think all of us here are passionate about how we can help contribute to offshore safety to ensure that our loved ones are coming home every day or at the end of our different shifts. And that's what, you know, we're really doing. And so I appreciate everybody being on this call and giving us the opportunity to be able to talk about what we're passionate about.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Lillian.
Karen, do you have some closing words?
I just want to thank everyone for joining the call. And if you have other questions, I'm sure Russ and Curt will be happy to address them, at a different time. And look forward, y'all, to our next meeting.
Very good. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You're in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.